So I was telling my buddy about how, socialism is so pervasive in our society, and I was talking to him about our education system and how the educational system run by the state, their natural tendency will be to create the next bunch of state supporters, and how they have no incentive to produce free-thinking, independently minded young adults, but rather have every incentive to raise up a next generation that will be dependent on the state rather than independent. And he looked at me and said, John, it starts from the very first minute of kindergarten. And I said, what are you talking about? And so he began to relate to me this story from his childhood. And he said that, when he was young, his mom was married to his dad. And when him and his brother were very young, their dad left their mom. And she was left to raise two young boys on her own. And so oftentimes she worked two jobs to make enough money to put food on the table and put clothing on their back and provide them a place to live. He said he remembered watching his mother literally save change back in a coffee can. And every year when school time would roll around, she would go to that coffee can and go to the store, and with that change that she had saved throughout the year, she would buy their school supplies for the year. And he remembered going to school and how proud he was of his mom and of the fact of having his own school supplies that his mom had worked so hard to provide him with. And he said it was the most horrific thing to him at that time when on the first day of school they asked everybody for their school supplies and gathered them all up into one pile, and then redistributed the pens and the pencils and the paper and the folders back out evenly amongst all the different class mates. And he was telling me how he remembered just sitting there so angry and bitter that his mom had worked so hard to send him to school with those school supplies. Something he could be proud of, that his mom worked hard to be able to send him to school with the things that he needed. And then to have them just expropriated from him just like that, he was so angry. And he told me he remembered sitting there thinking, why did my mom have to work so hard to send me to school with these school supplies when other children's parents, for whatever reason, did not send their kids to school with any supplies, but yet their kids still wound up with the benefit of school supplies. And he said he remembered even at that age noticing that year after year in the kindergarten, in the first grade, in the second grade, it was the same kids whose parents never sent them to school with school supplies. And he remembered thinking, why should my mom work hard to send me to school with supplies? But furthermore, what incentive will the parents of these children that don't have school supplies ever have to actually make the sacrifices necessary to send their kids to school with school supplies the next year, when they were given school supplies in the previous year when they had not bought any? And he was relating that to me as how it's a microcosm of a whole socialist system, and specifically how the educational system here in America doesn't necessarily educate our children, although they do a little bit of that, but they more inculcate our children with the ideas and the philosophies of collectivism and statism. And it continues on and on and on throughout the course of education in this country. In middle school, you begin to learn that Horace Mann was this great hero for instituting public education in America, when he said, that children should be taught that their instructors were superior to their parents. And he said things like all crime and poverty would be eliminated in a generation once public education had been fully instituted. A quote that's eerily similar to the claims that Marx made about communism. But that's never brought up in the state-run education system. Then we learn what a hero FDR was, when he in fact unleashed a deluge of laws and bills promoting state power that were deemed and rejected and overturned as unconstitutional at that time, and many more that could be argued are constitutional, that were unconstitutional, that were passed and remain with us to this day. And beyond the constitutional debate, there's hardly any serious debate left regarding the fact that his policies lengthened the Great Depression at that time. Yet, going through a high school history class, you'd be left with the impression that FDR was a great statesman and a hero and saved us, when in fact we're still reaping the repercussions of his overreaching government edicts. And so the public education system will be necessarily and by definition a mechanism by which to promote the ends of the state, which is to increase government and diminish individuality and liberty. And it starts, in this instance, right from the very beginning, in kindergarten. And it's no wonder that we're raising up a generation of people that are dependent on the state, that walk around with an entitlement attitude, with their hand out, rather than ready to contribute to society, rather to take responsibility for themselves. And somehow this system is applauded as a noble endeavor for society to undertake. And of course it only winds up with power in the hands of the wealthy and influential, and less power in the hands of everyday individual people. So it's really something to think about. Is this the road we want to continue to go down? And so far it has been, but I think people that value liberty are quickly beginning to see what a destructive path it will be.